If you've been following the Design Click Build blog for any length of time, you probably already know that I have a great appreciation for the power of components in SketchUp. In this video, I wanted to show you a couple of interesting features about using nested components. And if you're not familiar with them, nested components are basically components inside of components. And in this example, which I did for a training session with a group of people in Brazil, I have, for example, my cases. I'm going to make a copy of this one and just bring it out here. This case is a component, and it is made up of subcomponents, so top, bottom, sides. One of the things that I did in this particular instance is I created a set of components for the holes in the side panels. And the reason I did this is that the client wants to be able to show these cases open but without those holes. And so what I've done is, well, actually, let's go back to this one. Let me set up X-ray here. You can see that if I get in here, I've got, for example, these are shelf pin holes. These and up here are holes for hinges, and then there's holes in the edges for connectors. These are shipped flat and assembled on site. And then on the outside of the case, there's some holes for screws that hold cleats. Well, you can see the cleats back here in the X-ray view that hold the dress panels on the outside. And so they want to be able to show a customer the inside of these cases without having those holes show. And so what I've done is I've created a nested component that consists of the side as a panel, and it's a solid component. And then each of these sets of holes is also a solid component. And then I've given those holes a tag. In older versions of SketchUp, this would be a layer, so that that can be turned off and those holes don't clutter up the view. But they also want to use this model to go to a CNC machine for cutting the panels and drilling all the holes. So once the design is finished, and by the way, those hole components can be modified so their locations can be changed and that sort of thing very easily. But then to get in here, and I'm going to open my component so I'm to the panel and the holes components. But now they can use, let's say, subtract from the Enter Solid tools. I always forget which one of these because I normally use a keyboard shortcut. But I'm going to select this, and now I will select my holes, and there I've got the holes cut. So when they're ready to add the holes, so they've got some real holes for the CNC machine to use, they can create those. But they don't have to have them until they're ready. Now, the other thing that's nice about this is I've created, in this case, I've got a left component and a right-hand component, and they're separate. They are not the same component, which means that in this case you can see I don't have my holes cut yet. But if I want, I can put in my shelf pin holes. Let me turn off shadows here. And so you can see now I've got the holes in there. But I don't need to add the holes for the hinge screws because this side doesn't need those holes. So the case works out to be set up so it could go either way. So I can go through very quickly, cut those holes if I need them, or omit them if I don't, and then only the holes, the actual holes in the panels, get recorded for in the file that's generated for the CNC cutting. And of course, because they're components, you can see that I have, after editing the one cabinet, I've got my shelf pin holes and my hinge holes all the way through. So, and I could change these, make a cabinet unique so that I could maybe have hinges on the left in these two cases and on the right on the other one if I wanted to do that. So there's one way that I've done this. And again, I've assigned tags so that I can show or hide the details that if I don't want to show them, or my client doesn't want to show them to his client. So there's one way, and by the way, I've saved out these components so that I can bring in a copy of the case. Now this one, because my holes are turned off, is not showing those, but this one hasn't been modified yet, and so I can bring in a copy and it's already set up with all the holes. That component can obviously be modified for size, and again, you could edit this. If this was going to be a taller case, we could add more shelf pin holes, for example, or we could omit shelf pin holes if we don't need any. Maybe we don't need the top 3 pairs. That component can be edited, and I can just delete those, and now I'm only going to end up with shelf pin holes down in this section. So there's a lot of capability in that respect. Another way to do this, let's go to another SketchUp file here. So here I've got a model of a table that's going to be featured in an upcoming issue of Fine Woodworking. This is the model I have created for the plans that will be available in the Taunton store shortly after the publication. And what I did here is I knew, in this case, I knew that there were going to be pins through the tenons, but at the point when I started this model, I didn't know exactly where those pins were supposed to be relative to the inside edge of the legs. So what I did is I created the leg and put in the pins, but I didn't drill the holes. And in fact, what I've done is, because these are going to be drawboard, I've actually got, if I open this up for editing, you can see that there's actually 2 copies of the pin here. The one that's closer to the inside of the leg will be the one that's used to drill the hole in the tenon, and then the outer one will be for the leg itself. And I've done the same thing up at the top. I've got 2 pins, and the ones that are closer to the inside of the leg are the ones that are going to be, I'll get rid of those. I'm just keeping those right now to drill the hole. And so let's do this. I'm going to make sure I've got both of those selected and both of those. So now I do know where the pins need to be. I need to move those over 3/8 of an inch to get them in the right location. And then I've also taken the time here to make a couple of temporary tags. And so first of all, let me go back here. With the components nested like I've got, so I've got the leg and all the pins in a larger component, I was able to copy the legs to put them in the other positions. And when I edited the location of these pins just now, it modified those, fixed that in the other 3 legs. I've created a tag, and this would be a layer in older versions of SketchUp, for just the pins that are going to be used for cutting the tenons. And I'm going to turn that off for the moment. I did create a tag for the legs with the pins, and that's really another temporary tag because in a little bit I won't need that. But now I've got the leg with the pins as a component. What I'm going to do, because I no longer need these as nested components, is explode those. Alright, so since the leg itself is a component, when I drill the holes, I won't need to have this all of the legs as with their pins as nested components. You could leave it, but there really isn't any need. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the leg out here. And this time, instead of using the Enerot Solid Tools, I'm going to demonstrate Boole Tools 2. And for what it's worth, this one will work in SketchUp Make. Enerot Solid Tools is a pro-only tool. And these differ from the native solid tools in that they respect the component-ness of the components. The native solid tools, when they modify a component, they convert it to a group. But I don't want that to happen here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, actually I don't even need to select anything. For the first holes, I'm drilling in the legs. So I'm going to use the trim tool, and I need to trim this with that. And you see I've got a hole there, and with that, and come on, whoops, start that again. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to trim that, and now I've got the hole going through. Alright, so that's done, and I guess I can get rid of that. Now I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of some layers. The next thing I'm going to do is drill the tenons, and so I'm going to get rid of my legs and the pins. I'm going to bring the pins for cutting the tenons back. Might as well get rid of all the rest of this stuff so it's out of the way and you can see what I'm doing. Because we don't need buttons or false tenons. We do need, oops, the rails. There we go. Alright. And again, just so you can see what happens, I'm going, well actually in this case I'm going to, since I'm going to use the difference tool this time instead of trim, you'll see this because these pins are going to go away. So this time I'll use difference, and so I'm going to select the rail, and then I'm going to click on the pin, and now it goes back to 1, so I'm going to select the rail, select the pin, select the rail, select the pin, select the rail, select the pin. And those are all done. Now I didn't really need the pins back here, but they kind of came along for the ride, so I'll just turn off my rails, select those pins and get rid of them. Turn my rails back on. You can see they all have the holes. I can turn my other parts back on. And there is my model done. All the details are in, the tenons are drilled. So in this case, what I was doing was I was setting up, preparing for when I had the right information to locate those things. And I set it up in a way that made it very easy for me to make the necessary changes without having to go through and make sure I did it the same in all the legs. And that made the whole job very simple. So hopefully there's something there that you can use. And let me know if you have any questions.